So in light of all of our geometry testing recently where we ruined the butter knife trying to cut through a nail, I wanted to see if we could actually take a butter knife using this thicker steel portion here and actually make it pass the nail test. Why? I don't know, because it's fun. And I think it might show you how important geometry is, but also how heat treatment and steel type also plays a role. First off, what's the hardness of a butter knife? Looks like 48.5. 48.5 HRC. I don't know. Maybe it will pass the nail test. Next, what's the hardness of a nail? Well, in order to find out, I had to flatten two sides of the nail on the grinder to give me a flat surface to measure on. Yeah, it's not even 20. So there you have it, folks. The nail hardness is 20 HRC. The butter knife hardness is 48.5. So I put a 33-degree bevel on our butter knife. Why 33? Because it was the max that my work platform would allow. And we'll start with the vise test. Here we go. Place your bets below. I heard something. Check it out. It survived. No way. That is actually very surprising. So I found part of the nail. Can't find the other half. It's under the workbench somewhere. It wasn't. It was still taped to the vise. So there you have it. It will survive being forced to a nail on a vise. However, what if we hammer it through? I survived too. Wow. I can see where it went through, but there's zero damage. I'm actually quite surprised. I mean, is this like a super steel butter knife? I don't know. Might want to write this brand name down. So I'm actually super surprised that this worked, even hammering it through. Don't really know what else to say. Other than the butter knife is quite a bit harder than the nail, so we should technically be able to add geometry to the knife and make it pass. I just wasn't sure how much geometry. Is this going to make a usable knife? Absolutely not. But I think it does show the power of geometry. Bet you thought we were done. Oh no. Let's thin this guy down, see how thin we can get. So we'll take this from our wedge shape geometry and thin it down to more of a knife type geometry. Alright, so we're currently about 95 thousandths behind the edge, which is stupid thick, but let's see what happens. Alright, so I actually think we had more damage when we smashed it into the anvil. There's a tiny bit there, but I think that came from when I literally hit it into the anvil, because the anvil face is harder than the butter knife is, for obvious reasons. So back to the grinder to thin it down some more. Now we are about 66 thousandths behind the edge. I mean, there's a tiny bit of damage. I mean, I can barely see it. Maybe you can see it. I mean, that's a pass for me. Let's thin it out. So because we weren't getting any apex damage at 33 degrees, I took it down to 27 degrees per side and thinned it to 50 thousandths behind the edge. We're about 50 thousandths behind the edge, and we are at a 27 degree angle. We're getting into some like some off-the-shelf survival type knife geometry here. Dude. I mean, that is not bad. That can be sharpened out. That's insane. I mean, this is not a fake butter knife. 50 thousandths behind the edge, 27 degree angle, butter knife steel. Let's thin her out some more. 36 thousandths. I think that was about it. Well, looks like that might be the limit. I think if we left a tiny bit more material on there, we would have been okay. But looks like 37 thousandths, 38 thousandths behind the edge is just a little too thin. So here's our test results for our 48.5 HRC butter knife. Test 1, with a 33 degree wedge shape, we were able to chop a nail with no damage. Test 2, with 95 thousandths behind the edge and 33 degrees per side secondary bevel, We again pass the nail test with no damage. Test 3, with our 66 thousandths behind the edge, our 33 degree secondary bevel, again, we pass the nail test. Test 4, at 50 thousandths behind the edge. We're getting into the realm of off-the-shelf stock survival knives here with 27 degree secondary bevel equals pass the nail test. Insane. Test 5, at 36 thousandths behind the edge and a 27 degree secondary bevel is our failing point. So somewhere between 50 thousandths and 36 thousandths behind the edge is our failing point. We could go back and fine tune this and find that spot, but it's a butter knife. Who freaking cares? But if we were a custom knife maker per se, and we were trying to fine tune a particular design for the steel type, the hardness and heat treatment that's on that knife, then this would be a really good starting place, and we could go back and refine this to offer the absolute best geometry possible for hard use, if that's the type of knife that we were making. So this is how we would run through this particular process. And let me give you some perspective on this. This is a off-the-shelf, it's had some sharpening done to it, but dollar store chef's knife. Behind the edge on this guy is about 48 thousandths. Now before I get anybody who's like, take the $1 chef's knife and pound it through a nail and see if it survives, because it has the same behind the edge thickness as our butter knife did. Well, the thing here is that even though they have the same behind the edge thickness, our geometry on our butter knife is still thicker because our blade is actually shorter. So our wedge is thicker. It thickens up really quickly as we get farther and farther down the blade. If we do measure about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the blade, we're still going to have a thicker blade in our butter knife here because it's a shorter blade profile than we will on something like a chef's knife, which is why this knife is not going to survive at the same behind the edge thicknesses as our butter knife did. This probably isn't going to make a lot of sense for those of you questioning this, but I'm still just going to throw it out there. Just remember that as you get thinner, the more important the steel, the hardness, and the heat treatment becomes, and the thinner the edge geometry that you can run for the particular task that you're doing. So I'm trying to figure out how to run this out to at least 8.5 minutes so that I can get maximum ad revenue on this video. So I wanted to see if I could actually hammer a nail into a piece of wood with a butter knife. Like smashing my fingers into the table more than I'm hammering the nail.